everyone. I'm Beth with Mother Cover, and we are diving into the 4 pillars of parental leave today. And we're talking about, today we're talking specifically about the pillar that relates to transition planning and how the work actually gets covered when somebody is going on leave. So I'm very excited to be joined by Lacey, who is the founder and CEO of Balanced Good, a consultancy that supports social impact, particularly when it comes to parental leave. And Lacey, I'm really excited that you're doing this today. Thank you for taking the time. We share a lot in common.
Yeah, thanks so much, Beth. I still remember when I found out about Mother Cover, and I'm so grateful someone else is in this space showing up, doing the work that needs to be done. I'm really excited for the conversation today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we do similar things, but in different spaces and coming at it from different angles. But I think the coolest thing when we got to connect it and meeting you is it really solidified in my mind that there is a whole kind of economy and community around trying to solve the problem around parental leave or the negative experiences or the disruption that is still felt around it. And there's action coming for solving this and not just talking about it. So we have that shared goal of supporting parents and teams in a way that's thoughtful and also practical. So your perspective on this topic is incredibly valuable as you see firsthand what happens when planning is either done really well or not done at all. So I'm excited to dig into this topic with you. And I have a few questions that we've geared up. I'm excited, like I said, to see wherever this conversation takes us. But let's start with the big picture.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many organizations, from nonprofits to enterprises, still treat parental leave like a one-off, as I said, disruption, instead of something they should proactively plan for?
Yeah, I think, and maybe this isn't a popular response, but I think it's because they can. Organizations have been doing this for so long, and unfortunately, this is the reality, right? But when I think about this question, obviously you and I are coming at it from a different perspective. And so to flip this question, I think it really is like, what happens if you look at parental leave as an opportunity and a chance to demonstrate to your employees and to your team that you care? It really can be seen and used, parental leave, a thoughtful parental leave, as a tool for retention, right? And if it's thoughtful, if it's supportive, the question is then what impacts does that have on your team?
Yeah, and I think pushing beyond just checking boxes to say like, well, we have a policy, that was my plan. A policy and a plan are totally different.
Yeah. There's intentionality around a plan, right? And people, and I'm sure we'll dive into this, but people feel buy-in, people feel seen and heard when there's a plan, and that makes them feel valued in the company.
Absolutely. So what does good actually look like then? So when you've seen work coverage and that plan, so we're talking specifically about what that transition plan looks like and then how the work actually gets covered, because that's a big thing that I think you and I would probably both agree on is the gap, where there's a lot talking about the policy, maybe the plan up front, but then how does the work actually get done? And what have you seen when this is done well? What was done different?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? So I think there's the logistical, tangible piece of, okay, finding out what deadlines are ongoing when the person's on leave, what work back plans, what ownership, what responsibilities across any role. It doesn't have to be, obviously I come from the nonprofit and social impact space, but in any space, it's looking at that from whether it's a 3-month leave to a 6-month to an 18-month leave. What are the key deliverables that need to happen in that time? And this takes work. Often we see organizations kind of like, oh, we've got a couple weeks left with this person, let's get all of their knowledge, but there's an intentionality around it. Ultimately, apart from adoption, people usually have a little bit of a runway when it comes to planning for their parental leave. So why not take advantage of it and document how, as things are coming up, that these things need to happen again while the person's away? And then I think that there's a human element to it as well. So yes, there's the workload, but it's also having the conversation with the person going on leave. What are their concerns? What are their ambitions, right? I think so often there's an assumption that when someone goes on leave, they don't want to be communicated with. They want to fully disconnect. But that's actually not the case for the majority of people that we've worked with and supported too. Ultimately, your career is a huge element and piece of who you are, and you want to maintain that, right? I mean, you want to be seen and heard in terms of, here are my concerns. And then also speaking to the employers, what are their concerns when this person's on leave? And then thoughtfully building a plan around that versus just kind of checking boxes.
Yeah, we find that too, of even just letting managers know that it's okay to ask their communication preferences. Because, like you said, it sounds like the assumption is that we shouldn't bother them at all. And some want that, and that is absolutely fine. But like I said, it is quite common for people to being completely cut off can add to the anxiety and what's actually happening while I'm away. There is a balance that you can strike that doesn't pull them back into work when they're wanting to focus on this important thing going on in their life, but still can give them context or check-ins if they want that in a way that's really thoughtful.
Yeah, it's hard to just expect somebody when they return to just jump back in and know what's going on. But if there's this connection, and I always use my own anecdotal experience. I had 3 parental leaves. So 2 of them were traditional, and one of them was when I was an entrepreneur. And so I was working. When I was working and had my parental leave, for me, that was the best one. I was mentally the healthiest. I felt engaged in my work, and I didn't have this disconnect of mother and employee or worker, right? I'm the same person, right? And so you don't have to disconnect these 2 roles that this person plays and say that they're separate, because they're not.
Right. So when you're working with companies, with nonprofits about planning transition coverage, who's typically, I guess, tasked with figuring out the transition plan? Is it the person going on leave? And then what have you found works for coverage planning, or the different options where it could be there is no backfill, there is an interim, or what are kind of the other options?
Yeah, I mean, I think typically the person that's tasked with planning for their leave is the person going on leave, right? And that adds a whole other element of stress. And I think if there's some intentionality around, we know leaves are going to happen, how do we plan for them? So that way when the person comes to their manager with this exciting news, there can be a, okay, great, here's what we've done in the past. Here are some tools. Here are some resources. And it's not just, there's been so many people who have reached out to me, and I'm sure the same with you, Beth, where they're just like, I have no idea what to do. I've never done this before if it's their first parental leave, right? So if people can just have a little bit of a roadmap and managers can give that to them, that's fantastic. And I'm not saying that managers need to have that roadmap. That's why services like ours are around. So we can help them create a roadmap and a template, and they could use that moving forward. Whether it is hiring interim or fractionally to support that role, whether it's, okay, if we're going to shift some of this work amongst the team, how do we do it in an equitable way that also you still need backfilling, right? You can't just expect a team to pick up and divide a full person's role. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to go in on this, and not just kind of, here, you're going on parental leave, you figure it out, right? Let's have a collaborative conversation.
Yeah, and recognizing that this is a crazy time in somebody's life where they're also figuring out nurseries and maybe daycares down the road and navigating doctor's appointments and things like that. They already have a lot extra things that are on their plate as well, on top of doing their day-to-day job. Now they've got to figure out this transition planning as well. So coming in that as a partnership and looking at it as not solely just their responsibility, but how can you help them navigate that. But so this is the part that companies struggle with, or where do things typically break down, do you see?
Yeah, I think I have a unique perspective because we cover roles in the social impact space. In the social impact space, probably too with like smaller startups and different organizations that you serve, there's not always an people equity and culture team, or not always an HR team. So there's no ownership or leadership of who does this process and how do we support our team member, right? And so it's often managers who maybe have never navigated this before or have had their own poor experiences. And so they're not really sure what to do. And so I like to look at it from a perspective of the managers and management don't know what they don't know. And so how can we support them in knowing that? So instead of waiting for a manager to assemble, like I said, what tools could be created when someone shares this news, and having your managers, management feeling supported in supporting their team in this transition.
Yeah, and what I often hear from parents who have gone through it before say that it's like winning the manager lottery of whether you have a manager that can help guide you through it or not. And I think that's where, again, both of our organizations come in, is being able to have a support structure so that every manager can deliver a really great experience without necessarily needing to be an expert in what great parental leave looks like. Even HR teams don't have to be experts in what great parental leave looks like if you have the right tools in your tool chest, so to speak. So, all right. So say we've had a successful transition. We figured out how the work is actually going to get covered and completed while the parent is out. Let's talk about the return with the handoff. When somebody comes back from leave, what separates a thoughtful, supportive transition from one that feels rushed or disconnected?
Yeah, I think just like the pre-planning, when someone's returning to work, it's that there's thoughtfulness and intentionality around it. So connecting with the person before they're returning. One of the things that we do at Balanced Good is we provide a return to work playbook, right? So it's really about, okay, here are all the things that happened. Here are the key projects. Here's what your roadmap looks like for your first month back to work, any upcoming deadlines. And then we also include recommendations on how we can make this role more working parent friendly. It doesn't mean that we have to restructure the role or anything like that, but maybe there's a couple tweaks that are going to make it a lot easier for that parent to meet their performance metrics and deliverables in the role. Typically, our team has been in that role for the last year, 3 months, 6 months, whatever the length is. And so we have some insights and we like to share them. And then I think looking at how can we, when appropriate, stagger return to work so you're not jumping in full time, and just supporting that person, because we know the transition to putting your child in daycare can come with hiccups. And so how can we support those hiccups and pre-plan for them?
Yeah, so it doesn't also feel like the word around accommodation or like a special favor that you're asking for more when you were just away. Parents naturally already carry a lot of guilt. So even being able to have some of these conversations as part of the transition plan too, of this is what I think a good re-onboarding will look like, or some of the flexibility that we can offer anybody throughout the company, because we all have important things that we care about, whether it's a child or something else. But yeah, again, making those standardized so it doesn't feel like you're making a request or a favor.
Yeah, and I think it's just having those strong policies in place, right? So everyone on the team feels seen and knows what they can and can request.
This has been really helpful, and especially around making the invisible part of planning for work visible. I want to ask one more question because it is, well, as we'll be releasing these in Women's History Month, what is one action leaders or companies should take this Women's History Month that can better support parents going on leave? What would you tell them to do?
I would say have transparent conversations, right? Have transparent conversations with your team. Maybe even to just look at what is your current parental leave policy, because I think a lot of organizations don't know until they have to dust it off, right? So looking at that. And then I would say for women in Women's History Month, I would like to just challenge and say that women have enough on our plate. So let's not add more. Let's take time to rest and reflect during Women's History Month.
I love that call. Yeah. Don't put more on women to bring together all the women in your company, another party planning. Don't do that. That's all of them. Yeah. Love that. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm so happy to be in this space with you and be able to partner and collaborate and, like I said, grow this as an ecosystem that better supports both parents and companies and organizations. Thank you very much for joining us.
Likewise, I appreciate it, Beth.